Jack Rayner never thought his own children would leave him to die. But on a frozen January afternoon in Snowbend, Montana, that's exactly what happened. His 3 adult kids drove away angry, abandoning the 54-year-old widowers in a surprise blizzard with nothing but his German shepherd, Kodi, and the land they wanted him to sell. As the temperature drops and snow blinds everything around him, Jack makes his way to the old oak where he carved his wedding vows decades ago, ready to freeze beside his late wife's memory. Then, just before nightfall, something impossible happens. 6 wolves emerge from the white forest, not attacking, but circling, protecting. What ancient secret drew them to Jack that night? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something special for you. The morning had started like most mornings in Jack Rayner's life. Quiet, purposeful, and tinged with the kind of solitude that had become his constant companion since Sarah passed 3 years ago. He woke at dawn, as he always did, to Kodi's warm breath on his face and the soft whine that meant the dog needed his morning routine. Jack pulled himself from bed, joints protesting the Montana cold that seeped through even the cabin's thick log walls, and shuffled to the kitchen to start the coffee. The cabin had been built by his grandfather in 1947, constructed from timber harvested right here on the property. Every beam, every plank, every stone in the fireplace had a story. Jack knew them all. His grandfather had told him those stories on winter nights just like this one, sitting by that same fireplace, teaching him about responsibility and legacy and what it meant to be a Rayner. Back then, Jack had been a boy who thought he understood. Now, at 54, he was a widower who wondered if he'd understood anything at all. He poured his coffee into Sarah's favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle that she'd refused to replace because, as she'd said, the imperfections make it ours. Jack stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the 200 acres of pine forest and rolling meadowland that comprised the Rayner property. In the distance, perhaps 200 yards from the cabin, stood the oak tree. Even from here, even through the morning frost on the window, he could see it clearly. That tree had been Sarah's favorite spot on the entire property. Kodi pressed against his leg, patient but insistent. Jack smiled and scratched behind the dog's ears. "All right, boy, let's go check the fence line." The German shepherd had been Sarah's last gift to him, adopted from a breeder just 3 months before the cancer finally took her. "You're going to need someone to talk to," she'd said, her voice already thin and tired. "Someone who'll listen without judging and love you without conditions. That's what dogs do best." She'd been right, as she was about most things. Kodi had become more than a pet. He was family, companion, and on the hardest days, the only reason Jack bothered to get out of bed. They completed their morning routine, walking the property perimeter, checking fence posts for damage, noting where deer had crossed during the night. The January air was crisp and clean, the kind of cold that woke you up from the inside. Jack moved through the tasks with practiced efficiency, his breath forming clouds in the morning air. This land, these routines, this life, it was simple. Maybe too simple by modern standards, but it was his. Every acre held memories. Every tree had witnessed some moment of his life. The meadow where he'd proposed to Sarah. The creek where they'd taught the kids to fish. The ridge where they'd scattered her ashes when it became clear that no grave could contain her spirit. He was nearly back to the cabin when he heard the vehicles. 2 of them, from the sound of it, coming up the long gravel drive that connected his property to the county road. Jack frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. Out here, 12 miles from the nearest town, visitors were rare and usually announced themselves beforehand. Kodi's ears perked up, but the dog showed no signs of alarm. That meant family, probably. The only people who came unannounced were his children, and they hadn't visited in nearly 6 months. Not since the last awkward Christmas where nobody had known what to say and everyone had left early. Jack walked around to the front of the cabin as two SUVs pulled into the clearing. Marcus emerged from the first vehicle, his oldest son, 32 years old and looking every bit the successful businessman in his pressed slacks and designer jacket. Emily climbed out of the second SUV, his daughter, 28, her face already set in that expression of forced cheerfulness she wore when she was about to ask for something. Tom, his youngest at 25, got out last, hanging back near his vehicle with his hands shoved in his pockets. "Dad," Marcus called out, his voice carrying that particular tone of false enthusiasm that Jack had learned to recognize over the years. "Surprised to see us?" "Surprised is one word for it," Jack replied, keeping his voice neutral. He led them into the cabin, gestured to the living room. "Coffee?" "We're fine," Emily said quickly, settling onto the couch. "We don't want to take up too much of your time." That was how Jack knew this wasn't a social call. When family visited just to visit, there was time for coffee, time for small talk, time to pretend that everything was normal. When they were in a hurry, it meant they wanted something. Marcus didn't waste time with preliminaries. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and set it on the coffee table between them. "Dad, we've been doing some research and we've found an incredible opportunity. A developer out of Missoula is looking to expand into this area. They want to build luxury vacation cabins, high-end stuff, sustainable, minimal environmental impact, and they're interested in this property." Jack picked up the folder but didn't open it. "I see. The offer is substantial," Marcus continued, leaning forward. $2.3 million. That's more than this land is worth on the open market. They're willing to pay a premium because of the location, the forest access, the views. $2.3 million, Jack repeated quietly. He looked at his son, then at his daughter, then at Tom, who was staring at the floor. "And you drove all the way out here to tell me this?" "To discuss it," Emily interjected. "Dad, that's a life-changing amount of money. Think about what you could do. You could move somewhere warmer, closer to medical facilities. You're not getting any younger, and these winters are the same as they've always been," Jack said. "I've lived through 54 of them. I imagine I can handle a few more." Marcus's jaw tightened. Jack recognized that look. It was the same expression Marcus wore when a business negotiation wasn't going his way. "Dad, be reasonable. This place is too much for you to manage alone. Mom's gone. You're out here by yourself, miles from help. What happens if you get hurt? What happens if there's an emergency?" "I have a phone, and I have Kodi." "A dog isn't going to call 911, Emily said, her voice rising slightly. "Marcus is right. This place is too isolated, too much work for one person. And honestly, what's the point? You're holding on to a property it's just land. It's not like we can do anything with it. None of us want to move back here. Tom's in Denver, I'm in Seattle. Marcus is in Bozeman. This place is just sitting here." Jack set the folder back on the table without opening it. "This land has been in our family for 4 generations. Your great-great-grandfather was granted this property in the 1880s. Your grandfather built this cabin with his own hands. Your mother and I raised you 3 here. You learned to walk in that meadow. You caught your first fish in that creek. Your mother's ashes are scattered on that ridge." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "And you're calling it just land?" "That's not fair," Emily protested. "We're not disrespecting Mom's memory. We're trying to be practical. You always taught us to make smart financial decisions." "I taught you that some things matter more than money." "Easy to say when you're not drowning in debt," Marcus snapped. The false enthusiasm was gone now, replaced by something harder. "Some of us have real problems, Dad. Real financial pressures. This money could change our lives." "And what about my life?" Jack asked quietly. "Did you consider that?" Tom finally spoke up, his voice soft. "Dad, maybe we should just—" "Stay out of this, Tom," Marcus cut him off. "You don't have kids. You don't understand financial responsibility." Jack watched the exchange, seeing the family dynamics that had formed over the years. Marcus, always the leader, always certain he knew best. Emily, always backing up her older brother, always seeking approval. Tom, the youngest, always trying to keep the peace, always getting shut down. It was a pattern he and Sarah had noticed years ago, but never quite knew how to address. "Let me ask you something," Jack said, his voice still calm but carrying an edge now. "Did any of you consider that I might not want to sell? That this land might mean something to me beyond its market value?" "Of course we considered it," Emily said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "That's why we're here, to talk to you about it, to help you understand." "Understand what?" "That my children see their inheritance as nothing more than a real estate transaction." Marcus stood abruptly. "That's not what this is about. Don't make us the villains here. We're trying to help you. By asking me to sell the one thing in this world that still connects me to your mother." The room went silent. Jack could hear the wind picking up outside, rattling the windows slightly. He glanced out and noticed the sky had changed, clouds rolling in, darker than the weather forecast had suggested. "Dad," Emily tried again, her voice softer now, tears forming in her eyes. "We need this. Marcus he's got some financial issues that need to be resolved. And David lost his job 3 months ago. We're barely keeping up with the mortgage. This money would solve your immediate problems," Jack finished for her. "And then what? In 5 years, when you've spent it, when there are new problems, what then? Will you wish you'd kept the land? Will you regret selling the place where your mother lived and died?" "Mom would want us to be practical," Marcus said. "She would want us to take care of ourselves." Jack stood slowly, walked to the mantel above the fireplace. There, in a small wooden box that he'd carved himself, sat Sarah's wedding ring. He picked up the box, ran his fingers over the wood grain. "Your mother," he said quietly, "would be heartbroken to hear you talk about this place the way you are. She loved this land. She understood what it represented." "She also understood that life changes," Marcus countered. "She was practical. She was realistic. You're being sentimental." "Maybe I am," Jack admitted. "Maybe that's exactly what I'm being. But this land isn't for sale. It wasn't for sale yesterday. It isn't for sale today. It won't be for sale tomorrow. I'm sorry if that creates problems for you, but that's my decision." Marcus's face flushed with anger. "You're being selfish. You're thinking only about yourself." "And you're not." The question hung in the air like an accusation. Emily started crying openly now. Tom moved toward her, put a hand on her shoulder. Marcus grabbed his briefcase, his movements sharp with frustration. "Fine," Marcus said. "Keep your land. Keep your memories. Keep your stubbornness. But don't come crying to us when you're stuck out here in an emergency. Don't expect us to drop everything and come running when you realize you made a mistake." "I won't," Jack said simply. Marcus headed for the door, Emily following, still crying. Tom lingered for a moment, met his father's eyes. There was something in that look. Regret, maybe, or understanding. But then Marcus called from outside, and Tom turned and left. Jack stood at the window and watched his children drive away. The sky was darker now, definitely darker than it should be. The weather service had called for light flurries, nothing serious, but Jack had lived in Montana long enough to know that weather could change fast, especially in January. He looked down at Kodi, who had been sitting quietly throughout the entire confrontation. "Just you and me, boy," he said quietly. "Same as always." But even as he said it, he felt the weight of what had just happened. His children had come to him not as children visiting a father, but as investors approaching a property owner. They had reduced everything, the land, the memories, the legacy, to a dollar amount in a folder. And when he'd refused, they'd left angry, as if he'd wronged them somehow by choosing to keep what was his. He noticed, almost absently, that the first snowflakes had started to fall. Within minutes, those flakes had multiplied, the wind picking up, visibility dropping. Jack checked his phone. 8% battery. He'd forgotten to charge it overnight. The weather alert that popped up made his stomach tighten. Severe blizzard warning. Conditions deteriorating rapidly. Seek shelter immediately. He tried to call Marcus, to warn him about the weather, to make sure they got to town safely. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried Emily next. Same result. Finally, he called Tom. The phone rang 3 times before Tom answered. "Dad." Tom's voice was broken by static. "Dad, I'm sorry. We shouldn't have—" "Tom, listen to me. The weather's turning bad. Get to town. Don't try to—" The call dropped. Jack looked at his phone. 5% battery now. He tried to call back, but the signal was gone. Outside, the snow was falling so thick that he could barely see past the porch. What had started as a few flakes had become a full blizzard in less than 10 minutes. Jack stood at the window, watching the world turn white, and felt something settle in his chest. Not quite fear, not quite resignation, but something in between. His children were gone. His phone was dying. The blizzard was here. And Jack Rayner, 54 years old, widower, father of 3 ungrateful children, stood alone in his grandfather's cabin with nothing but a dog for company, and wondered if maybe, just maybe, this was how it was supposed to end. The blizzard came on with a ferocity that surprised even Jack, who had lived through 40 years of Montana winters. Within an hour, the wind was howling against the cabin walls, and the snow was piling up against the windows. He could barely see the tree line anymore, just an endless curtain of white that seemed to erase the world beyond the glass. Jack assessed his situation with the practical mindset that had gotten him through harder times. The firewood pile on the covered porch would last maybe 48 hours if he was careful. The pantry held canned goods, enough for a week if he rationed. Water wasn't a problem. He had the well. The real problem was heat. Once the firewood ran out, the cabin would become uninhabitable within hours. Temperatures like this with the wind chill could drop to 20 below zero or worse. His phone sat on the kitchen counter, the battery icon flashing red. 3%. He'd meant to charge it last night, had plugged it in before bed, but must have knocked the cord loose in his sleep. A stupid mistake, the kind that didn't matter until suddenly it mattered a great deal. He tried calling Tom again. The signal flickered, died, came back just long enough to connect. "Dad?" Tom's voice was faint, breaking up badly. "Tom, where are you?" "About 10 miles from town. We're stuck. The roads—" Static consumed the line for a moment. "Can't see anything. Marcus says we should wait it out." "Good. Stay in the vehicle. Keep the engine running for heat, but crack a window. Carbon monoxide." "I know, Dad." Tom's voice softened. "I'm sorry about earlier. We shouldn't have come at you like that. We'll talk about it later, so just get yourself safe. What about you? Are you—" The call died. Jack stared at the blank screen as the battery gave its last gasp and the phone powered down completely. He was alone now, truly alone, with no way to call for help and no way for anyone to reach him. Kodi whined softly, pressing against Jack's leg. The dog could sense his tension, could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Jack knelt down, ran his hands through Kodi's thick fur. "It's all right, boy. We've been through worse, right?" But even as he said it, he wondered if that was true. When Sarah was sick, when they were facing the end, at least they'd been facing it together. At least they'd had each other, had the comfort of shared presence. This was different. This was isolation in its purest form. Jack moved through the cabin, doing what he could to prepare. He brought in extra firewood, stacking it by the hearth. He filled every pot and bucket with water from the tap, just in case the pipes froze. He pulled out blankets, arranged them near the fire, all the practical steps, all the survival protocols he'd learned over a lifetime in this unforgiving country. But as the afternoon wore on and the storm showed no signs of letting up, Jack felt something shift inside him. He stood at the window, watching the snow bury the world, and thought about his children's words. "This place is too much for you. You're out here by yourself. What's the point?" Maybe they were right. Maybe he was holding on to something that no longer made sense. Sarah was gone. The kids had their own lives. What was he protecting? What was he preserving? 4 generations of history that his own children saw as nothing more than a real estate opportunity? Jack walked to his bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed he'd shared with Sarah for 33 years. On the nightstand, in a drawer he rarely opened, he kept her things. Not everything, most of her clothes had gone to charity, but the essential items. Her reading glasses, her favorite book, spine cracked from repeated readings, her journal, which he'd never been able to bring himself to open. And at the very back of the drawer, wrapped in cloth, his father's journal. He pulled it out now, unwrapped it slowly. The leather cover was old, cracked, the pages yellowed. His father had started writing in it sometime in the early 1980s, not long before he died. Jack had found it among his father's things, had read a few entries, then put it away. The words had seemed like the ramblings of a man losing his grip on reality. But now, sitting in a cabin surrounded by a blizzard, abandoned by his children, Jack opened the journal again and read with different eyes. March 15th, 1982. They came again last night. The wolves. 7 of them circling the property. I tried to leave, tried to drive to town, but the truck wouldn't start. When I went back inside, they were gone. Margaret thinks I'm imagining things. Maybe I am. But I can feel them watching. April 3rd, 1982. Found the old papers in Dad's trunk. The covenant, the pact. I always thought it was legend. Stories he told to entertain us. But it's real. It's all real. Our family made a promise generations ago. I don't want this. I never asked for this. May 22, 1982. The wolves came for me today, right up to the porch. The big one, the alpha, looked at me with those eyes. I swear it understood. I swear it was trying to tell me something. But I can't. I won't. This is too much. I'm not my father. I'm not built for this. November 8th, 1982. It's getting worse. I can feel them in the forest, always watching, always waiting. They want something from me, but I can't give it. I won't give it. If I have to leave this land, I will. Better to run than to accept this curse. The entries ended there. 2 weeks later, his father had died in the woods during an early winter storm. Officially, it was exposure. Unofficially, the family never talked about it. Jack's mother had moved them to town shortly after, sold most of the land except for the core 200 acres, and refused to ever speak his father's name again. Jack had been 14 at the time. He'd loved his father, had admired him, had wanted to be like him. And then his father had died in these woods, alone and confused, and Jack had spent the rest of his youth trying to understand why. Now, reading these entries again, Jack felt something cold settle in his stomach. The wolves. His father had written about wolves. Wolves that watched him, that seemed to want something from him. Wolves that drove him to desperation. It was crazy. It had to be crazy. His father had been mentally ill, had been breaking down, had died because of his own delusions. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more here, something he'd been unwilling to see before. He looked out the window. The storm was worse now, the wind shaking the cabin, the snow piling up to the windowsills. The temperature inside was dropping despite the fire. Jack added more wood, but he could do the math. By tomorrow evening, the wood would be gone. By the morning after that, if the storm hadn't passed, he'd be in serious trouble. And what then? Wait for rescue that might not come. His children were probably stuck in town, unable to get back even if they wanted to. The sheriff's department wouldn't send anyone out in weather like this. He could try to walk to town, but 12 miles in a blizzard was a death sentence. Jack sat by the fire. Kodi curled up at his feet and thought about Sarah. She'd always said that this land was special, that it held something precious that couldn't be measured or sold. He'd thought she meant memories, sentimentality. But what if she'd meant something else? What if she'd known something he didn't? "When I'm gone," she'd told him near the end, her hand weak in his, "don't you dare give up on living, but if your time comes, face it on your terms, at our tree." At the time, he'd thought she was talking about burial, about where he should be laid to rest, but now he wondered if she'd meant something more immediate, more literal. Jack stood, his decision made. If he was going to die out here, and the odds were looking increasingly like he might, he wasn't going to die alone in this cabin, slowly freezing as the fire went out. He was going to die where he'd lived the best moments of his life, under the oak tree, where he'd proposed to Sarah, where he'd carved their vows into the bark on their wedding day, where he'd scattered her ashes and promised her that he'd never forget, never give up, never let anyone take this land from them. He bundled up in his warmest coat, his heaviest boots, his thickest gloves. He grabbed a flashlight, though he wasn't sure how much good it would do in the whiteout conditions. He took the small wooden box from the mantel, the one containing Sarah's wedding ring. If he was going to freeze, he wanted that with him. "Come on, Kodi," he said quietly. "One last walk." The dog looked at him with those intelligent brown eyes, seeming to understand that this was different, that this wasn't just another routine. But Kodi stood, loyal to the end, and followed Jack to the door. Jack stepped out into the blizzard, and the wind hit him like a physical force. The cold was immediate and brutal, cutting through his layers as if they weren't there. He could barely see 5 feet in front of him, but he knew this land, knew every inch of it, and he turned toward where he knew the oak tree stood. The walk that should have taken 3 minutes took nearly 20. Jack pushed through snow that was already knee-deep, Kodi struggling beside him, both of them fighting for every step. The wind screamed around them, the cold searing his lungs with every breath. His fingers went numb inside his gloves. His face felt like it was being cut by 1,000 tiny knives. But he kept going, one foot in front of the other, driven by some force he couldn't quite name. Not just duty, not just memory, something deeper, something that felt almost like calling. And finally, through the wall of white, he saw it. The oak tree, massive and ancient, standing like a sentinel against the storm. Jack reached it, pressed his back against the trunk, and slid down to sit at its base. Kodi curled up against him, sharing what little warmth they had between them. Jack's fingers were too cold to feel properly, but he managed to open the wooden box, to look at Sarah's ring one more time. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the wind, to her memory, to whatever was listening. I tried to keep the promise, but I think this is where it ends." He closed his eyes, felt the cold seeping deeper into his bones. This was it then. This was how Jack Rayner's story would end. Frozen against an oak tree, abandoned by his children with only a dog for company and a dead wife's ring in his hands. The wind howled. And then, cutting through the storm, Jack heard something else. Something that made his eyes snap open and his heart skip a beat. A howl, long and low and unmistakably close. Wolves. Night had fallen completely, though Jack couldn't tell exactly when. Time had become meaningless in the storm, in the cold that was slowly stealing his consciousness. He drifted between awareness and something darker, his mind playing tricks, showing him memories that felt more real than the present moment. He saw Sarah, young and beautiful, laughing as he tried to carve their initials into the oak's bark with his pocket knife. "You're going to cut yourself," she'd warned, and sure enough, he had, and she'd wrapped his thumb in a handkerchief and kissed it better. He saw his children as toddlers, running through the meadow, their joy so pure and uncomplicated. He saw his father, standing at the edge of the forest, looking back at him with eyes full of something Jack couldn't name. Regret, warning, fear. The howl came again, closer this time. Jack's eyes opened. Had they been closed? And he tried to focus through the darkness and the snow. Kodi stirred against him, but the dog's reaction surprised Jack. No growling, no hackles raised, just an alert stillness, a watchful waiting. Then Jack saw it, a shape moving through the storm, massive and deliberate. The wolf emerged from the white curtain like a ghost materializing from fog. It was huge, far larger than any wolf Jack had ever seen in pictures or documentaries. Its fur was dark gray, almost black, with silver markings along its shoulders and neck. But it was the eyes that stopped Jack's laboring heart. Silver gray eyes that caught what little light existed and reflected it back with an intelligence that seemed impossible. The wolf stopped about 10 feet away, standing perfectly still despite the wind that whipped the snow around it. It looked directly at Jack, and Jack felt something pass between them, some current of recognition that defied explanation. "You're not real," Jack heard himself say, though his voice was barely a whisper, stolen by the wind. "You're hypothermia. You're my brain shutting down." The wolf tilted its head slightly, and Jack could have sworn the gesture held something like amusement. Then another wolf appeared, then another. Jack counted them as they materialized from the storm, 6 in total, including the alpha with the silver eyes. They didn't approach him directly. Instead, they formed a loose circle around the oak tree, around Jack and Kodi, positioning themselves with what seemed like deliberate strategy. Kodi shifted, moving slightly away from Jack's side, and Jack felt a moment of panic, but the dog didn't flee. Instead, Kodi moved toward the alpha wolf, stopping a few feet away. The two animals regarded each other, and then, impossibly, Kodi lowered his head in what looked like a gesture of respect. The alpha responded with a soft huff, almost like acknowledgement. Jack's rational mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Wolves were predators. They should be attacking, or at the very least keeping their distance from a domestic dog. They certainly shouldn't be forming a protective perimeter around a dying man. But that's exactly what they seemed to be doing. As he watched, the wolves began to settle into their positions, lying down in the snow but maintaining their vigilant circle. And then Jack felt it. Warmth. Not much, but enough to notice. The wolves' bodies were creating a windbreak, blocking the worst of the storm's fury. Their combined presence was generating a microclimate, a small pocket of slightly less lethal cold. Jack's mind drifted back to his father's journal. "The wolves came for me. They want something from me. It's in our blood." He'd thought his father was crazy, but what if he'd been right? What if there was something about their family, about this land, that connected them to these animals in a way that defied natural law? A memory surfaced, vivid and clear, despite Jack's deteriorating state. He was 8 years old, maybe 9, walking in these woods with his father. They'd stopped at a clearing and his father had knelt down, put his hands on Jack's shoulders, looked him straight in the eyes. "Jackie," his father had said. He was the only one who'd ever called him that. "There's something you need to understand about our family, about this land. Your great-great-grandfather made a promise, a pact with something older than us, older than memory. He pledged our bloodline to protect this place, and in return, we were promised protection when we needed it most." "Like a contract?" Jack had asked, trying to understand with a child's logic. "More than a contract, a covenant, a sacred bond. Your grandfather honored it. His father had stopped, looked away toward the trees. "I'm trying to honor it, but it's hard, Jackie. It asks so much, and sometimes I wonder if the price is too high." "What kind of price?" His father had smiled sadly. Maybe you'll never have to find out. Maybe it will skip you, go to one of your children or grandchildren. The pact doesn't choose everyone, just the ones it needs. At the time, Jack had filed the conversation away as another one of his father's odd philosophical moments. His father had always been a little strange, prone to cryptic statements and long silences. After his death, Jack had forgotten about it entirely. Until now. Jack looked at the alpha wolf, at those impossible silver-grey eyes, and suddenly understood. This wasn't random. This wasn't hypothermia-induced hallucination. This was the pact. This was the covenant his father had spoken about. The wolves hadn't come to kill him. They'd come to protect him, because he was a Rainer, because somewhere in his bloodline a promise had been made, and these creatures honored their promises even when humans forgot. "I don't understand," Jack said aloud, not caring if he sounded insane talking to a wolf. "What do you want from me?" The alpha stood, walked closer. It moved with a grace that seemed almost deliberate, almost ceremonial. When it was close enough to touch, though Jack made no move to do so, it lowered its head, and Jack saw the scars on its shoulder. They weren't random marks from fights or accidents. They formed a pattern, a deliberate pattern, a medicine wheel, 4 lines radiating from a central point, creating 4 equal sections, north, south, east, west, and at each cardinal point, a smaller mark that might have been a paw print, or might have been something else, something intentional. Jack's breath caught, his grandfather's trunk. The symbol burned into the cedar lid. It had been the same pattern, exactly the same pattern. "You're marked," Jack whispered. "You're part of this, part of the pact." The alpha held his gaze, and Jack felt something flow between them. Not words exactly, but understanding, images, feelings, a sense of vast time, of agreements made in darkness and honored through generations, of humans and wolves bound together by something greater than either species, of land that was sacred, that held power, that demanded stewardship and choice. Jack felt that most clearly. The pact required acceptance. It could be rejected, as his father had tried to reject it. But rejection came with consequences. His father's lonely death in these woods, the family's slow dissolution, the loss of connection to something ancient and meaningful. But acceptance. Acceptance meant responsibility. It meant becoming something more than just a man, living on his land. It meant becoming a guardian, a keeper, a bridge between the wild world and the human one. It meant sacrifice. Jack closed his eyes, felt the cold still seeping into his bones despite the wolves' protection. He thought about Sarah, about her final words. "Face it on your terms." Was this what she'd meant? Had she known? Had she understood what he was too blind to see? "I don't know if I can do this," Jack said softly. "I'm just a man. I'm broken. My wife is gone. My children hate me. I'm 54 years old and tired and so alone." The alpha wolf moved closer still, and before Jack could react, it pressed its massive head against Jack's chest, just over his heart. The touch was gentle, almost tender, and impossibly warm. Jack felt tears freeze on his cheeks as something inside him cracked open, not broke, opened, like a door he'd kept locked for 3 years, finally giving way. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, I don't understand this. I don't know what it means. But okay, if you're offering protection, I accept. If you're asking something of me, I'll try. The alpha pulled back, met Jack's eyes one more time, and in that gaze, Jack saw approval, agreement, recognition. Then the wolf returned to its position in the circle, and the pack settled in to wait out the storm. Jack leaned back against the oak tree. Kodi pressed against his side again, and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Time lost all meaning. Jack drifted in and out of consciousness, but each time he surfaced, the wolves were still there, maintaining their protective circle. He should have been dead. He knew that with the clarity that came from a lifetime in this harsh country. The temperature had to be well below zero now, the wind chill pushing it even lower. No one could survive this long exposed to such conditions, yet he was still breathing, still aware, still alive. The wolves rotated their positions with what seemed like practiced efficiency. Jack watched through half-closed eyes as one wolf would stand, stretch, and trade places with another, always maintaining the windbreak, always keeping the circle intact. It was coordinated, purposeful, intelligent in a way that transcended animal instinct. Through his haze, another memory surfaced. His grandfather's attic, the old cedar trunk that had always been locked, that his mother had forbidden him from touching. Some things are meant to stay buried with the old ways, she'd said. But Jack had been a curious child, and one summer when he was 12, he had found the key hidden in a drawer and opened it. Inside had been papers, mostly. Old documents, letters in languages he couldn't read, photographs of people he didn't recognize. But what had captured his attention was the symbol burned into the trunk's inner lids, the medicine wheel. 4 directions, 4 points, a perfect balance. At the time, he'd thought it was just native art, decoration from a bygone era. Now he understood. It was a seal, a sign, a mark of the covenant. The trunk was still in the cabin's attic. He'd moved it there when he and Sarah had taken over the property, had never bothered to open it again, but now, as he sat freezing under the oak tree, protected by impossible wolves, he desperately wanted to know what else was inside. What secrets had his grandfather kept? What knowledge had been passed down through generations and then lost when his father rejected the calling? A sudden commotion pulled Jack from his thoughts. The wolves had all risen to their feet, ears pricked forward, bodies tense. They were looking toward the cabin, toward the access road. Through the storm, Jack heard something. Engines, voices, lights cutting through the darkness. Someone had come back. Jack tried to call out, but his voice was too weak, stolen by the cold and the wind. Kodi, sensing his distress, barked urgently, once, twice, 3 times. The sound carried across the snow, a desperate signal in the night. The lights changed direction, moving toward them. Flashlight beams cutting through the blizzard. Voices calling out, closer now. "Dad! Dad, where are you?" It was Tom. His youngest son had come back. The wolves didn't flee at the approach of humans. Instead, they intensified their protective circle, moving closer to Jack, as if shielding him from potential threat. The alpha stood directly between Jack and the approaching lights, a living barrier. "Dad!" Tom's voice was clearer now, closer, then. "Oh my God, don't shoot, don't shoot. Those wolves, they're protecting him." Other voices responded, men Jack didn't recognize. Tom must have brought help, a rescue party. Jack could see the beams of multiple flashlights now, could make out shapes moving through the storm. "Are you sure they're not attacking?" Someone called out. "Look at them," Tom responded. "They're guarding him. I don't know what they are, but they're not attacking." The rescue party approached cautiously. Jack could see Tom now, and 2 other men, all bundled against the cold, moving slowly toward the oak tree. The wolves watched them but didn't retreat. The alpha remained in place, its eyes fixed on the approaching humans with what seemed like assessment rather than fear. Tom stopped at the perimeter of the wolf circle, about 10 feet from Jack. Their eyes met, and Jack saw tears on his son's face, frozen against his cheeks. "Dad," Tom said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have." Jack managed a weak smile. "You came back?" "Of course I came back. As soon as the call dropped, I turned around. I had to get help, had to get equipment, but I came back as fast as I could." Tom looked at the wolves, wonder and fear mixing in his expression. "What is this? What's happening?" Before Jack could answer, if he even had an answer to give, the alpha wolf turned to look at him. That silver-gray gaze held Jack's for a long moment, and Jack felt a wave of something flow through him. Communication, understanding, farewell. Then, slowly, ceremonially, the alpha began to back away. The other wolves followed suit, moving in perfect synchronization, widening the circle, creating space for the humans to approach. They didn't flee in panic. They withdrew with dignity, with purpose, like soldiers standing down after a mission accomplished. The alpha paused one final time at the edge of visibility, looked back at Jack with those impossible eyes, and Jack heard, no, felt, words that weren't words. "The calling is yours now, Keeper. Honor it." Then they were gone, vanished into the storm as suddenly as they'd appeared. The rescue party rushed forward. Hands grabbed Jack, emergency blankets wrapped around him, Tom's voice urgent in his ear. "Stay with me, Dad. Stay with me. We're going to get you warm. We're going to get you safe." Jack felt himself being lifted, carried. The world spun. He caught glimpses of faces, of concerned expressions, of Tom walking beside the makeshift stretcher, holding his hand. Kodi trotted alongside, refusing to leave Jack's side. "The wolves," Jack tried to say. "Did you see?" "We saw, Dad," Tom said quietly. "We all saw. I don't know what it was, but we saw." They reached the cabin and Jack was carried inside. The fire had gone out, but someone immediately set about rebuilding it. Another person wrapped Jack in more blankets, checked his vitals, spoke medical terms that Jack's foggy brain couldn't quite process. Through it all, Jack kept his hand clenched around the small wooden box containing Sarah's ring. He hadn't let go of it the entire time. It was his anchor, his reminder of why this land mattered, why the covenant mattered, why any of it mattered. As warmth slowly returned to his body, bringing with it the painful sensation of frozen flesh coming back to life, Jack looked around the cabin. His home, his grandfather's legacy, the place where he'd loved and lost and learned what it meant to be part of something larger than himself. Tom sat beside him, still holding his hand, tears streaming freely now. "I'm not leaving," Tom said firmly. "Marcus and Emily can think what they want, but I'm staying with you. However long it takes, I'm not leaving you alone again." Jack squeezed his son's hand weakly. "Tom," he managed to say, his voice rough. "There's something in the attic. A trunk. Cedar with a mark on the lid. I need you to bring it down." Tom looked confused but nodded. Okay, Dad. Whatever you need." "It's important," Jack insisted. It's about the wolves, about what they were protecting, about what I need to understand." One of the rescue workers, an older man with a weathered face and knowing eyes, spoke up. "You're talking about the Wolf's Keeper Covenant." Jack's head turned sharply. "You know about it?" The man nodded slowly. "My grandfather told me stories. Old stories from before the town grew up. About families that were bound to the land, to the wolves. About guardians who protected the old ways. I always thought they were just legends." "They're not legends," Jack said softly. "They're real. And I think I'm one of them now." Tom looked between Jack and the older man, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning comprehension. "Dad, what are you saying?" Jack closed his eyes, feeling exhaustion pulling at him. "I'm saying that everything changed tonight, Tom. The wolves, they chose me. They honored a pact I didn't even know I was part of. And now I have to honor it back. I have to understand what that means." "We'll figure it out," Tom said firmly. "Together. Whatever this is, whatever it means, we'll figure it out together." Jack felt tears prick at his eyes. One son had returned. One son had chosen to stand with him. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was how legacies survived, not through perfect understanding, but through loyalty, through the choice to stay when leaving would be easier. "The trunk," Jack repeated, his voice fading. "Please." "I'll get it," Tom promised. "Just rest now, Dad. Just rest." But even as Jack's eyes closed, even as his body finally surrendered to exhaustion, his mind was racing. The covenant, the wolves, the medicine wheel, the trunk in the attic that held secrets his grandfather had kept, that his father had tried to escape, that now called to Jack with an urgency he couldn't ignore. He'd survived the night. The wolves had made sure of that. But survival was just the beginning. Now came the harder part. Understanding why. Jack woke in his own bed, wrapped in what felt like every blanket in the house. Pale morning light filtered through the windows, and for a moment he thought the entire night had been a fever dream. But then he tried to move, and pain shot through his extremities, the burning, tingling sensation of frostbite healing. Real pain. Real consequences. Kodi was lying on the floor beside the bed, head resting on his paws, brown eyes watching Jack intently. When their eyes met, the dog's tail thumped once against the floor. "Hey, boy," Jack said, his voice hoarse. "We made it." Footsteps on the stairs, and then Tom appeared in the doorway carrying a steaming mug. "You're awake. How do you feel?" "Like I froze to death and came back." Jack accepted the mug. Tea, hot and sweet. "How long have I been out?" "About 12 hours. Dr. Morrison was here most of the night. She said you're lucky. Another hour out there and—" Tom's voice caught. "She said it was a miracle you survived." "It wasn't a miracle," Jack said quietly. "It was the wolves." Tom sat on the edge of the bed, his expression troubled. "Dad, about that. The men who helped me bring you in, they saw the wolves too. But this morning when the storm cleared and we went back out to look for tracks, there was nothing. No paw prints, no signs they were ever there. Just your tracks and Kodi's leading to the Ard's tree." Jack felt his chest tighten. "They were there, Tom. You saw them yourself." "I know what I saw, but the evidence says otherwise. And Marcus, he called this morning. He's saying we should have you evaluated. He's talking about mental competency hearings, about having me declared insane so he can sell the land anyway." Jack's voice was hard now, anger cutting through the exhaustion. "That's his play. If I'm crazy, if I'm seeing things that aren't there, then I'm not capable of making decisions about the property." Tom looked down at his hands. "There's something else. Something I found out this morning. Marcus has been in contact with the developer for weeks. Dead. He forged your signature on preliminary sale documents. If something were to happen to you, if you were to become incapacitated or die," Jack finished, "then the sale goes through automatically. That's why he was so angry when I refused. It wasn't just about the money. He'd already committed to the deal." "I'm so sorry," Tom said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what he'd done." Jack reached out, put a hand on his son's shoulder. "I know you didn't. You're not like them, Tom. You came back. That's what matters." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of family betrayal hanging between them. Then Jack remembered. "The trunk. Did you bring it down?" Tom nodded toward the corner of the room. There it sat, the cedar trunk that Jack remembered from childhood. Scratched and weathered by decades, but still solid, still bearing that distinctive symbol on its lid. The medicine wheel, burned deep into the wood. Jack pushed himself up, ignoring his body's protests. Tom tried to stop him, but Jack waved him off. "I need to see what's inside. I need to understand." The lock was old but sturdy. Jack had no key. He'd lost it decades ago, if he'd ever really had it. But desperation made him strong, and with Tom's help, they forced the lock open. Inside, the trunk was packed with items wrapped in cloth and oil paper. Jack lifted them out carefully, laying them on the bed. Letters, dozens of them, dating back to the 1880s. Photographs showing men and women in period dress standing in front of the cabin, always with wolves visible at the edge of the frame. A ceremonial knife with wolf engravings running the length of the blade. Dried herbs bundled with leather cord. And at the very bottom, a leather-bound book. Jack opened it with trembling hands. The first page bore an inscription in faded ink. The History and Covenant of the Wolf's Keepers of Montana, begun by Thomas Rayner, 1743, continued by his descendants. Wolf's Keepers, Tom read over Jack's shoulder. What does that mean? Jack turned the pages, scanning the cramped handwriting that changed style every few decades as different hands took up the chronicle. The story that emerged was both fantastic and strangely credible. In 1743, Thomas Rayner, Jack's ancestor, had been traveling through this wilderness when a sudden blizzard caught him unprepared. Near death, he'd been found by a pack of wolves who, instead of killing him, had protected him through the storm, just as they'd protected Jack. When he survived, Thomas encountered an elder from the local indigenous tribe who explained that the wolves were spirit guardians of the land, ancient beings who chose worthy humans to serve as intermediaries between the wild and civilized worlds. Thomas had pledged his bloodline to protect the wolves' territory in exchange for their protection of his family. He was taught certain rituals, certain ways of communicating with the pack, certain responsibilities that came with being chosen. Every generation, one family member would be selected through a trial by cold, a near-death experience in winter that tested whether the person was worthy. If they survived and accepted the calling, they became a keeper. The keeper gained abilities, enhanced senses, a telepathic bond with the alpha wolf, extended vitality while in service. But there were costs. The keeper could not leave the land for extended periods, must remain its guardian until death or until a successor was chosen, and must protect the territory from those who would harm it. Jack found photographs of his grandfather, dated 1940s, standing among wolves. He looked strong, confident, purposeful. There were journal entries describing how he'd used his connection with the pack to protect the town during harsh winters, how he'd guided lost travelers to safety, how he'd maintained the balance between human settlement and wilderness. Then came his father's entries, and the tone changed dramatically. His father had been chosen at age 28, young and unprepared. The responsibility had terrified him. He'd tried to fulfill the duties but had grown resentful, had seen the covenant as a curse rather than a gift. His final entries revealed a man planning to sell the land secretly, to break the covenant and flee. But he died before he could do it, Jack said quietly. In these woods, during a storm. Tom was reading over his shoulder, his face pale. Do you think the wolves— No, Jack interrupted. I don't think the wolves killed him. I think the land did. Or maybe he just gave up. Maybe trying to break a sacred covenant comes with its own consequences. Jack found more recent entries, these in his mother's hand. She'd known about the covenant, had watched it destroy her husband, had fled the land in fear. Her final entry, dated just before she sold off most of the property. I pray this skips a generation. I pray my son never has to face this choice. Let it end with us. But it hadn't ended. It had just lain dormant, waiting. Dad, Tom said slowly, are you saying this is real? That you're supposed to be some kind of— what, guardian? Protector? Jack closed the book, looked at his son. I'm saying that the wolves saved my life for a reason. I'm saying that I felt something out there, something that can't be explained by hypothermia or delusion. I'm saying that my father tried to run from this and died. My grandfather accepted it and lived a long, meaningful life. And now it's my turn to choose. What about Marcus and Emily? The sale? Jack's expression hardened. There is no sale. This land is not for sale, and it never will be. If Marcus wants to fight me legally, Let him try. I have documentation going back nearly 300 years showing that this property was granted with specific covenants that prevent its sale or subdivision. Let him try to forge his way past that. He'll say you're crazy. He'll use the wolves, your survival, all of it against you. Then we'll need help. Jack thought of the older man from the rescue party, the one who'd known about the wolf's keepers. There are people in town who remember the old ways, people whose grandparents knew my grandfather. We're not alone in this. Tom was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. Okay, Dad. If this is real, if you believe it's real, then I'm with you. Whatever comes next. Jack felt a weight lift from his chest. One son, one ally. Maybe that was all he needed. But even as he thought it, he heard a sound from outside. A vehicle approaching, then voices. Familiar voices. Marcus and Emily had returned. Jack stood at the living room window, wrapped in a blanket, watching his two oldest children climb out of their rental car. Marcus moved with aggressive confidence, Emily trailing behind with a pinched, anxious expression. They'd brought someone else, a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. That'll be their lawyer, Tom said quietly from beside Jack. Marcus called him yesterday. Let them come, Jack said. His voice was steady, calm. Something had changed in him during that night under the oak tree. The fear that had driven so much of his life these past 3 years. Fear of being alone, fear of disappointing his children, fear of failing Sarah's memory, had burned away in the cold. What remained was clarity. The knock on the door was sharp, impatient. Tom answered it, and Marcus pushed past him without greeting. Dad, Marcus said, his tone clipped and businesslike. We need to talk. This is Mitchell Graves, our attorney. We have serious concerns about your mental state and your ability to manage your affairs. Jack turned slowly from the window, meeting Marcus's eyes. Your concern is touching, considering you left me to die in a blizzard 2 days ago. That's not fair, Emily protested. The weather service said it would just be flurries. We didn't know. You knew I had no vehicle. You knew my phone was nearly dead. You knew I was alone. Jack's voice remained calm, but his words landed like hammer blows. And you left anyway because I wouldn't sell land that isn't mine to sell. Marcus's face flushed. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're not thinking rationally. You're isolated out here, you're grieving, and now Tom tells us you've been hallucinating about wolves. I wasn't hallucinating. Dad, please. Emily stepped forward, tears already forming. We're worried about you. The rescue team found you half frozen under a tree talking about wolves protecting you. But there were no wolves. No tracks, no evidence. Don't you see? You need help. Jack walked to the table where he'd laid out the contents of the trunk. He picked up the leather-bound book, held it up. Did you know about this? Did either of you ever ask about our family history? About why this land has been passed down for nearly 300 years? What does some old book have to do with anything? Marcus demanded. Everything, Jack said. It has to do with everything. This land isn't just property, Marcus. It's sacred trust. Our family made a covenant, a promise, generations ago. We pledged to protect this land in exchange for protection when we needed it most. Your great-great-great-grandfather made that promise. Your grandfather honored it. I've inherited it. And you? He looked at both Marcus and Emily. You want to sell it for vacation cabins? The lawyer, Graves, cleared his throat. Mr. Rayner, with all due respect, what you're describing sounds like a religious delusion, a fixation on family mythology that's preventing you from making sound financial decisions. Is it a delusion when 7 men witnessed the same thing? Jack countered. Tom and the rescue party all saw the wolves. All of them. They saw what you wanted them to see, Marcus shot back. You created a situation, and in the chaos of the storm, people thought they saw things. Mass hysteria. It's well documented. Tom stepped forward. I know what I saw. Those wolves were real. They were protecting Dad, and I don't care how crazy it sounds. You've always been too easily influenced, Emily said to Tom, her voice sharp. First Dad manipulates you into staying. Now he's got you believing in fairy tales. I'm not being manipulated. Enough, Jack said quietly, but with enough force that everyone stopped. Marcus, Emily, let me ask you something. Do you remember why your mother loved this place? Why she fought the cancer as long as she did? Emily's face crumpled. Don't bring Mom into this. She's already in this. She's in every tree, every stone, every inch of this land. She understood what it represented. She knew about the covenant. Yes, Emily, she knew. I found a letter she left me, written before she died, encouraging me to accept the calling when it came. She knew I might be chosen. She accepted it. She wanted me to accept it. Marcus threw up his hands. This is insane. You're telling us that Mom believed in magic wolves and sacred covenants? She was a practical woman. She was rational. She was both, Jack said. She understood that there are things in this world that don't fit neatly into rational categories. That doesn't make them less real. Graves spoke again. Mr. Rayner, I have documents here that your son has signed. Preliminary agreements with a development company. The paperwork indicates you gave verbal consent. I did no such thing, Jack interrupted, and I'd like to see those documents. Specifically, I'd like to see my signature. Marcus's expression flickered, just for a moment, but Jack caught it. Guilt. Fear. You forged my signature, Jack said flatly. Tom told me. You committed fraud, Marcus. You created documents claiming I'd agreed to a sale that I never agreed to. That's not just unethical. It's criminal. I did what I had to do, Marcus said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. You were being unreasonable. You were putting your own stubbornness above the family's needs. My stubbornness. Jack felt anger rising now, hot and sharp. You stole from me. You lied. You put me in legal jeopardy. And then you left me in a blizzard, and you have the audacity to call me stubborn. Emily was crying openly now. We needed the money, Dad. We needed it so badly. You don't understand the pressure we're under. Marcus has debts. I have debts. We're drowning. And you think selling this land would save you? Jack shook his head. Money doesn't solve the kind of problems you have. Integrity does. Responsibility does. Learning to live within your means does. I'm sorry you're struggling, Emily. I truly am. But stealing your father's land isn't the answer. We're not stealing, Marcus insisted. We're trying to salvage something before you destroy it with your delusions. Jack pulled out the old survey map, the one from 1743 showing the original land grant. This property was granted to Thomas Rayner with specific covenants. It cannot be subdivided. It cannot be sold outside the Rayner bloodline. Those restrictions were filed with the territorial government and are legally binding. Even if I wanted to sell, which I don't, I couldn't. Not legally. Not without breaking a covenant that's been honored for nearly 3 centuries. Graves took the map, studied it. His expression changed as he read the legal language. These covenants, if they're authentic, would likely supersede any modern agreements. They're authentic, Jack said. And there are more documents in that trunk proving it. Letters, legal filings, photographs, a complete historical record. Marcus's face had gone pale. You're bluffing. I'm not, and I think you know that. Jack stepped closer to his son. You came here expecting to bully me into submission, to use my grief, my isolation, my supposed mental instability against me. But I'm not weak, Marcus. I'm not confused, and I'm not going to let you destroy what 7 generations of Rayners have protected. This is ridiculous, Marcus sputtered. Graves, tell him. I need to review these documents more carefully, the lawyer said, still studying the map. If these restrictions are valid, and if there's evidence of forgery, then we may have a serious problem. We? Marcus turned on his lawyer. What do you mean, we? I mean, I can't be party to fraud, Graves said carefully. If your father's signature was forged, that's a criminal matter. I'll need to withdraw as your counsel." The room went silent. Jack watched the realization dawn on Marcus's face. He'd overplayed his hand. He'd built his entire strategy on the assumption that his father was weak, isolated, and too grief-stricken to fight back. But Jack wasn't any of those things. Not anymore. Emily broke the silence. "Dad, please, can't we find some compromise? Some way to make this work for everyone?" Jack looked at his daughter, saw genuine distress in her eyes, and softened slightly. "Emily, I love you. I love all three of my children, even when they make terrible choices. But there is no compromise here. This land is not for sale. It will never be for sale. When I die, it will pass to whoever the wolves choose next. Maybe Tom, maybe one of his children, maybe one of yours, but it will remain in the family, and it will remain protected." "When you die," Marcus repeated, his voice cold now. "And when will that be, Dad? When will you finally let go and let us have what's rightfully ours?" The words hung in the air like poison. Tom stepped forward, his fists clenched. Get out of this house right now." "Or what?" Marcus challenged. "Or I'll throw you out myself," Tom said, and the steel in his voice surprised everyone. "You don't get to talk to Dad that way, not in his own home, not after what you've done." Marcus and Emily exchanged glances. Then Marcus turned to Graves. "We're leaving. This isn't over." "I think it is," Jack said quietly. "You've shown me who you really are. Both of you. And I've learned that blood doesn't always mean family. Real family stands by you. Real family doesn't abandon you in a storm." Emily sobbed, but Marcus grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the door. Graves followed, still clutching his briefcase, looking uncomfortable with the entire situation. As they reached the door, Jack spoke one more time. "Marcus, Emily, you're still my children. If you ever want to come back, if you ever want to truly be part of this family again, the door's open. But you come back on terms of respect, not greed." Marcus didn't respond. He simply walked out, Emily stumbling behind him. The door closed, and silence fell over the cabin. Tom put a hand on Jack's shoulder. "You okay?" Jack nodded slowly. "I will be. Eventually." They stood together, father and son, watching through the window as Marcus and Emily drove away. In the distance, at the tree line, Jack could swear he saw movement. A flash of grey fur, silver eyes watching. The wolves were still there, still protecting, still waiting to see what he would do next. 3 days passed. Jack recovered slowly, his body healing from the ordeal, but his mind sharper than it had been in years. He and Tom spent those days going through the trunk's contents, cataloguing the family history, understanding the depth and breadth of the Wolf's Keeper covenant. Dr. Morrison visited daily, bringing supplies and checking Jack's progress. She also brought stories, memories from her grandfather about Jack's grandfather, about times when the wolves had protected the town, about miracles that couldn't be explained but were nonetheless real. "People around here used to know," she said on the 3rd evening, sitting by Jack's fire with a cup of tea. "Your grandfather was respected. People understood there was something special about this land, about your family. But after your father died, after your mother fled, that knowledge got buried. People forgot, or chose to forget." "Can you blame them?" Jack asked. "It's easier to believe in rational explanations." "Easier, yes, but not always true." Dr. Morrison smiled. "I'm glad you survived, Jack. I'm glad you accepted the calling. This land needs a keeper again." On the 4th morning, Tom's phone rang while they were having breakfast. Jack watched his son's face change as he listened, going from curious to confused to deeply troubled. "That was Sheriff Daniels," Tom said after hanging up. "He wants to talk to us. Today. Says it's urgent." They drove into town that afternoon, Jack's first trip off the property since the blizzard. The sheriff's office was in the old courthouse building, a stone structure that had stood since the 1920s. Sheriff Daniels was a man in his late 50s, weathered and competent, someone Jack had known casually for years. "Jack," Daniels said, gesturing them into his office. "Tom, thanks for coming in. We've got a situation." "What kind of situation?" Jack asked. Daniels pulled out a file, spread several documents across his desk. "2 days ago, we received a complaint from your son, Marcus. He's alleging that you're mentally incompetent and potentially a danger to yourself. He's provided statements from witnesses who claim you were found in a hypothermic state talking about wolves that didn't exist." Jack's jaw tightened. "I see." He's also filed for an emergency conservatorship, claiming that you need immediate mental health intervention and that he should be appointed to manage your affairs until you're evaluated. Tom leaned forward. "That's garbage. Dad's fine. He survived a blizzard. That doesn't make him incompetent." "I know that," Daniels said. "But here's where it gets interesting. When I started investigating the claim, I found something else." He pulled out another document. "Marcus has been in contact with the development company for 3 months. He's been negotiating this sale behind your back, Jack. And I found evidence of forgery. This document here," he tapped a paper, "purports to have your signature approving the preliminary sale, but I had it analyzed. It's not your signature." Jack felt ice in his veins. "He forged legal documents." "That's a felony," Daniels confirmed. "But it gets worse. I also received a tip from an anonymous source. Someone in the developer's office, I think, saying that Marcus had been discussing ways to accelerate the timeline. Ways to ensure you weren't around to contest the sale." The room went silent. Tom's face had gone white. "Are you saying Marcus was planning to—" "I'm saying we need to take this seriously," Daniels interrupted. "I can't prove intent to harm, not yet. But the pattern is concerning. Forgery, false competency claims, suspicious discussions about removing obstacles. I wanted to warn you, Jack, and I wanted to document everything officially. If something happens to you, if there's an accident or an incident, we need this on record." Jack's hands were shaking. His son, his firstborn. Planning not just to steal from him, but potentially to harm him. It was almost too much to comprehend. "There's one more thing," Daniels said, his voice gentler now. "The developer pulled out yesterday. Chen's company released a statement saying they're no longer interested in the Montana property due to legal complications and title disputes. Without the developer, Marcus's financial motivation disappears, but that might make him more dangerous, not less. Desperate men do desperate things." As if summoning a nightmare, there was a commotion in the outer office, raised voices. Then the door burst open and Marcus strode in, flanked by Emily and a man Jack didn't recognize. "Sheriff," Marcus said sharply, "I want to file assault charges against my brother. Tom has been harassing us, making threats." "That's a lie," Tom said, standing. "Marcus," Daniels said calmly, "I need you to step back. You're interrupting official business." "My father is the official business," Marcus shot back. "He needs help. He needs intervention, and Tom is enabling his delusions." The man with Marcus stepped forward. He was young, maybe 30, with the lean build and cold eyes of someone comfortable with violence. "Mr. Rayner," he addressed Jack, "my name is Cole Hester. I'm a private healthcare consultant. Your son has hired me to assist with your evaluation and care." "I don't need evaluation or care," Jack said quietly. "With respect, that's not your decision to make anymore," Hester replied. "Marcus has filed for emergency conservatorship. Until that's resolved, he has the right to make medical decisions on your behalf." "That's not how it works," Daniels interjected. "The conservatorship hasn't been granted yet. Jack still has full autonomy." "A technicality," Marcus said. "Dad's not well. Everyone can see it. He nearly died in that blizzard because he was chasing fairy tales. He's not safe on that property alone." Jack studied his son's face, searching for some trace of the boy he'd raised. But all he saw was calculation and desperation. This wasn't about concern. This was about control. "Marcus," Jack said slowly, "what happened to you? When did you become this person?" "I became realistic," Marcus snapped. "Something you never were. You live in a fantasy world where land and legacy matter more than the living people standing in front of you. Well, guess what, Dad? The real world doesn't care about your covenants or your wolves or your precious memories. The real world is about survival, and I'm doing what I have to do to survive. By destroying your father," Tom's voice was incredulous. "By helping him see reason," Emily interjected, though her voice lacked conviction. "Dad, please, just agree to an evaluation. Just let the doctors confirm you're okay. Then this all goes away." Jack looked at Emily, saw the conflict in her eyes. She wasn't as far gone as Marcus. There might still be hope for her. But Marcus had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "I'll agree to an evaluation," Jack said suddenly. Everyone looked at him in surprise. "But on my terms. I'll see a doctor of my choosing, someone local who knows me, and the results will be shared with everyone present. If I'm declared competent, which I will be, this stops. All of it. The conservatorship filing, the accusations, the harassment. Done." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. But it has to be soon. Today." "Dr. Morrison is outside," Tom said. "She drove us here. She can do the evaluation right now." Hester shook his head. "Dr. Morrison is biased. She's been treating your father. We need an independent evaluator." "She's the most qualified physician in the county," Daniel said firmly, "and she's neutral. If Jack passes her evaluation, that should satisfy everyone." 30 minutes later, they were all crowded into an examination room at the clinic. Dr. Morrison put Jack through a comprehensive mental status exam, testing his memory, his reasoning, his judgment. She checked his physical condition, his cognitive function, his ability to make informed decisions. The entire time, Marcus watched with barely concealed frustration. Finally, Dr. Morrison completed her notes and turned to address the room. "Jack Rayner is fully competent. His memory is excellent. His judgment is sound. He shows no signs of psychosis, delusion, or cognitive impairment. The trauma of surviving extreme cold may have created some vivid experiences, but that's not the same as mental illness. In my professional opinion, there is no basis for a conservatorship or any restriction on his autonomy." Marcus's face flushed dark red. "This is a whitewash. You're protecting him because he's my patient and I'm telling the truth," Dr. Morrison interrupted coldly. "If you disagree with my evaluation, you're welcome to seek a second opinion. But I'm putting my findings in writing, and they'll become part of the official record." Marcus turned on Jack, his composure finally shattering. "You've ruined everything. Everything. That land was supposed to save us. That money was supposed to fix everything, and you threw it away for what? For wolves that don't exist? For a covenant that's nothing but superstition? For principle," Jack said quietly. "For honor. For things you stopped valuing a long time ago." "To hell with your principles," Marcus snarled. "You know what? Fine. Keep your land. Die on it for all I care. But don't expect us to come running when you need help again. Don't expect us to be there when you're really dying. You made your choice. You chose land over family." "No," Jack said, his voice heavy with sadness. "I chose integrity over greed. You're the one who chose to stop being family." Marcus stared at his father for a long moment, his face twisted with rage and something that might have been grief. Then he turned and stormed out. Emily lingered, tears streaming down her face, but eventually she followed her older brother. Hester gave Jack a long, measuring look before leaving as well. The room fell silent. Jack sat on the examination table, feeling older than his years, feeling the weight of everything that had just broken apart. "I'm sorry," Dr. Morrison said softly. "I know that was hard." "It was necessary," Jack replied. "Some wounds need to be opened before they can heal. Maybe someday Marcus will understand. Maybe he won't. Either way, I did what I had to do." Daniels cleared his throat. "Jack, I want you to be careful. Marcus is unstable right now, and that Hester character. I don't like him. I'm going to have a patrol car drive by your property regularly, just to keep an eye on things." "I appreciate that, Sheriff." As they drove back to the property, Tom was quiet. Finally, he spoke. "Do you think Marcus would really try to hurt you?" Jack thought about it. "I think Marcus would do whatever he believed was necessary to get what he wants. And right now, what he wants is that land sold. So yes, Tom, I think we need to be very careful." They drove the rest of the way in silence, both of them watching the road, watching for threats, feeling the family that had once existed crumble into something unrecognizable. When they pulled up to the cabin, Jack saw something that made him stop. There, at the tree line, 7 wolves sat in a perfect row, watching, waiting, protecting. The covenant wasn't just a promise, it was armor, and Jack had a feeling he was going to need it. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He sat in the darkened living room, Kodi at his feet, watching the tree line where the wolves had positioned themselves. They were still there, barely visible in the moonlight, 7 shadows that never seemed to rest. He thought about his father, about how the weight of the covenant had driven him to desperation. Jack understood that desperation now. Being chosen wasn't an honor in any simple sense. It was a burden, a responsibility that could crush you if you let it. But it could also save you. It had saved him. Tom came downstairs around midnight, unable to sleep either. They sat together in the darkness, not speaking at first, just existing in the shared space of uncertainty. "I called Sarah's mom today," Tom finally said. "Told her what was happening. She wants to help. Said she'd testify about Marcus if needed, about how he's been acting." Jack nodded. Sarah's mother, Margaret, was a fierce woman in her 80s. She'd never particularly liked Marcus, had always said he had his father's ambition without his father's ethics. Jack had defended his son for years, but maybe Margaret had been right all along. "I also did some research on that Hester guy," Tom continued. "He's not a healthcare consultant. He's a fixer. Works for rich families who need problems to disappear. He's been investigated twice for elder abuse schemes, convincing families to institutionalize wealthy relatives so their assets can be controlled." Jack felt cold settle into his bones. "Marcus hired a criminal." "Marcus has become a criminal," Tom corrected. "The forgery, the false competency claims, now hiring someone to help forcibly commit you. Dad, this is serious. This is beyond family conflict." "I know." Jack was quiet for a moment. "Tom, I want you to do something for me. Tomorrow, I want you to take those documents from the trunk, the covenant papers, the historical records, everything, and put them in a safety deposit box at the bank, under your name. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. If something happens to me," Jack repeated firmly, "I need to know those documents are protected, that the truth about this land, about the covenant, survives even if I don't." Tom's hands were shaking. "Don't talk like that. I have to talk like that. I have to be realistic. Marcus is desperate, and desperate men are dangerous." Jack put a hand on his son's shoulder. "You've been a good son, Tom. The best son. Sarah would be so proud of you." They sat in silence until dawn broke over the mountains. With the light came a renewed sense of purpose. Jack made breakfast while Tom gathered the historical documents, preparing them for transport to the bank. But as they were finishing their coffee, Kodi began to growl. Jack looked out the window and saw a vehicle coming up the access road. Not Marcus's rental car, a work truck, white and unmarked. It pulled up to the cabin, and two men got out, Hester and another man Jack didn't recognize. Both wore casual clothes, but there was something military about their bearing. "Stay inside," Jack told Tom. "Lock the door behind me." "Dad, don't." But Jack was already moving. He stepped onto the porch, Kodi beside him, and faced the two men as they approached. "Mr. Rayner," Hester said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "we need to talk. Your son is concerned about your welfare. He's asked us to bring you in for a more comprehensive evaluation." "I've already been evaluated. Dr. Morrison declared me competent." "Dr. Morrison is a country doctor," the other man said. His voice was flat, professional. "Marcus wants you seen by specialists, people who can really help you." "I don't need help." Hester's smile faded. "Mr. Rayner, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but we're taking you with us. Marcus has signed the necessary papers. He's acting in your best interest." "Marcus doesn't have the authority to sign anything on my behalf. The conservatorship was denied." "It's in process," Hester said smoothly. "And in the meantime, we're exercising reasonable caution for someone who's a danger to himself." Jack felt his pulse quicken. This was it. This was Marcus's play. Get him off the property, get him committed to some facility, declare him incompetent while he was locked away, unable to defend himself. By the time Jack could fight back legally, the land would be sold and the money divided. "I'm not going anywhere with you," Jack said firmly. The second man moved closer. "Sir, please don't make this difficult." Kodi's growl deepened. The dog positioned himself between Jack and the two men, teeth bared. Hester reached into his jacket, and Jack tensed, expecting a weapon. But what Hester pulled out was a syringe. "This is a mild sedative," Hester explained. "Completely legal for emergency psychiatric transport. You'll sleep for a few hours, wake up in a nice facility where doctors can help you. Nothing to be afraid of." "That's assault," Jack said. "If you come near me with that, it's assault." "It's medical care," Hester corrected. "And your son has authorized it." Tom appeared in the doorway behind Jack, phone in hand. "I'm calling Sheriff Daniels right now. You two need to leave." "Make the call," the second man said. "Sheriff's department is 45 minutes away. We'll be long gone by then." They started moving forward. Kodi barked sharply, a warning. Jack raised his hands, ready to fight despite knowing he was outmatched. These men were younger, stronger, trained, but he wasn't going to make it easy for them. And then, from the tree line, came the howls. All 7 wolves emerged at once, moving with coordinated precision. They didn't run. They advanced with deliberate, terrifying purpose. The alpha led them, those silver-gray eyes fixed on Hester and his companion with unmistakable intent. Both men froze. Hester's hand, still holding the syringe, began to shake. "What the hell?" the second man breathed. The wolves formed a line between Jack and the two intruders. The alpha stood front and center, lips pulled back to reveal teeth that could crush bone. A low, rumbling growl emanated from the entire pack, a sound that resonated in Jack's chest and made his hair stand on end. Jack felt something surge through him, the bond he'd accepted under the oak tree, the connection that made him keeper. Without thinking, without planning, he spoke. Not with his voice, but with his mind. A command that flowed through the telepathic link the Covenant had created. Protect, but do not kill. The wolves responded instantly. They charged forward, not to attack, but to herd. Hester and his companion stumbled backward, terror clear on their faces. One wolf, a large gray female, knocked the syringe from Hester's hand. Another circled behind them, cutting off their retreat to the truck. "Get back!" Hester shouted, pulling a gun from his jacket. Jack's heart lurched. He hadn't expected weapons, but before Hester could aim, the alpha wolf moved with blinding speed. It leaped, hit Hester in the chest, and drove him to the ground. The gun went flying. Hester screamed, arms over his face, expecting to be torn apart, but the wolf didn't bite. It stood over him, one massive paw on his chest, teeth inches from his throat, and simply held him there. The message was clear. You're alive because I allow it. The second man tried to run. 3 wolves intercepted him, driving him back toward his companion. Within seconds, both men were on the ground, wolves standing over them, completely dominated without a single bite delivered. Jack walked forward slowly, Tom following with the phone still recording everything. Jack looked down at Hester, saw the man's eyes wide with primal terror. You came to my land, Jack said quietly. You came to harm me on the land I'm sworn to protect, the land that protects me in return. Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand what you've walked into? Please, Hester gasped. Please call them off. They won't hurt you unless I tell them to. But you need to understand something. This land is not for sale. It will never be for sale, and I am under protection that you cannot comprehend. Go back to Marcus. Tell him what happened here. Tell him that if he sends anyone else, if he makes any more moves against me, the next visit won't end with mercy. Jack sent another mental command. The wolves backed off slowly, maintaining their intimidating presence but giving the 2 men room to move. Hester and his companion scrambled to their feet, stumbling over each other in their haste to reach the truck. Wait, Jack called out. They stopped, looking back in terror. Jack walked to where the gun had fallen, picked it up, removed the magazine and chambered round, then threw all the pieces in different directions into the snow. Now you can go. They ran. The truck started with a roar and tore down the access road, fishtailing in the snow. Jack watched until they were out of sight, then turned to the wolves. The alpha approached him, and this time Jack didn't hesitate. He reached out, placed his hand on the great wolf's head, and felt the surge of connection, of understanding, of ancient pact, honored and renewed. Thank you, he said aloud. Thank you for protecting me. The alpha's eyes met his, and Jack heard, felt the response. It is why we exist. It is why you were chosen. Together, we protect what matters. The wolves retreated back to the tree line, resuming their watch. Tom came down from the porch, his face pale but determined. I got it, all on video, he said. Everything, the threats, the syringe, the gun, the wolves defending you. This is evidence, Dad. Solid evidence. Good. Jack put an arm around his son. Now call Sheriff Daniels. Tell him we need him here now. It's time to end this. As Tom made the call, Jack looked toward the distant oak tree, the tree where his vows were carved, the tree where he'd nearly died, the tree where he'd been reborn as something more than he'd been before. He was a keeper now, not just of land, but of legacy, of covenant, of the sacred bond between human and wild that his family had honored for generations, and he wasn't going to let Marcus, or anyone else, destroy that. Sheriff Daniels arrived within 30 minutes, bringing 2 deputies and a grim expression. Jack and Tom showed him Tom's video footage, the threats, the attempted forced sedation, the gun. Daniels' face darkened as he watched. This is kidnapping, he said flatly. Attempted assault with intent to unlawfully confine. The gun escalates it to armed assault. And Marcus hired these men? He shook his head. I'm issuing warrants. For Hester, his associate, and Marcus. Emily, too, if she was involved in planning this. She wasn't, Jack said quietly. Emily's following Marcus, but she's not driving this. Go easy on her if you can. Daniels nodded, made some calls. Within the hour, state police had stopped Hester's truck on the highway. The 2 men were arrested without resistance, both of them babbling about wolves and attacks. Their story sounded so outlandish that the arresting officers assumed they were on drugs. But the evidence was clear. They'd brought weapons and sedatives to Jack's property with intent to forcibly remove him. Marcus was harder to find. He wasn't at his hotel. His phone went straight to voicemail. But Emily called Tom around noon, her voice thick with tears. "Tom, please, Marcus is losing it. He's talking crazy. He's saying he's going to end this tonight, that he's going to make sure Dad can never stand in his way again. I'm scared. I don't know what he's planning, but I'm scared." Tom put her on speaker so Jack and Daniels could hear. "Emily, where is he?" "I don't know. He left hours ago. He said something about the oak tree, about how everything started there and everything would end there. Tom, I think he's going to hurt Dad. I think he's really going to hurt him." Jack felt ice in his veins. The oak tree, the sacred center of the covenant. Of course Marcus would go there. In his twisted logic, if Jack drew power from that place, then destroying it would destroy Jack's claim, his protection, his purpose. "Emily," Jack said, speaking directly to his daughter for the first time in days. "I need you to go to the sheriff's station. Right now. Ask for protective custody. Tell them everything Marcus has said." "I can't betray my brother. You already have," Jack said gently. "By warning us. By choosing what's right over what's convenient. Go to the station. Keep yourself safe. Let us handle Marcus." After Emily hung up, Daniels organized a response. Deputies were positioned on the access road. A state police unit was en route. But Jack knew Marcus, knew his son's stubbornness, his refusal to accept defeat. "He won't come up the main road," Jack said. "There's an old logging trail on the western edge of the property. It's overgrown, barely passable, but Marcus knows about it. We used to hike it when he was young." They drove to the western boundary, and sure enough, they found fresh tire tracks in the snow. Marcus's rental car was hidden in a grove of pines, empty. He was on foot somewhere on the property. Jack's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "End this the right way. Meet me at the tree. Alone. Or I burn it down and everything you care about with it." Jack showed the text to Daniels. The sheriff's expression was grave. "He's making threats. We need to bring him in now." "He won't surrender to uniforms," Jack said. "He'll do something desperate, but if I face him, maybe I can talk him down." "Absolutely not," Tom said immediately. "Dad, he's dangerous. He's armed, probably. You can't—" "I have to," Jack interrupted. "This is between Marcus and me. It always has been. The land, the covenant, Sarah's memory, all of it comes down to a father and son who can't see eye to eye." Jack looked at Daniels. "Give me 20 minutes. Stay back, out of sight, but close enough to intervene if needed. I'll wear a wire. You'll hear everything. If it goes bad, you come in. But give me a chance to reach him. He's still my son." Daniels hesitated, then nodded slowly. 20 minutes, but at the first sign of violence, we're moving in." They equipped Jack with a small microphone, tested it, confirmed the signal was clear. As Jack prepared to walk through the woods toward the oak tree, Tom grabbed his arm. "Dad, please be careful. Please come back." Jack hugged his youngest son tightly. "I will. I promise. The wolves are watching. I'm not alone out there." He started through the forest, Kodi at his side. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the pines. The temperature was dropping again, but Jack barely felt it. His focus was absolute, his purpose clear. He was walking toward a confrontation that would define everything, toward his son, toward the tree where his life had been saved and transformed, toward whatever ending this broken family story would have. Behind him, hidden in the trees, Daniels and his team followed at a distance. Above him, the first stars were appearing, and around him, moving like shadows, the wolves paced. The covenant was about to be tested in ways Jack had never imagined. Jack emerged into the clearing where the oak tree stood. Marcus was there, standing near the trunk, a red gas can at his feet. The smell of gasoline was sharp in the cold air. He'd already poured some around the base of the tree. Jack could see the dark stains in the snow. "Marcus," Jack said quietly, keeping his distance, "don't do this." His son turned. Marcus looked terrible, unshaven, wild-eyed, his expensive clothes rumpled and stained. This wasn't the confident businessman who'd arrived a week ago. This was a man at the end of his rope, all pretense stripped away. "Why not?" Marcus demanded. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't burn this whole place down. You love it more than you ever loved us. Let's see how much it means when it's ash." "This isn't about the tree," Jack said, taking a careful step closer. "This isn't about the land or the money. This is about you and me, about what broke between us." "You broke it," Marcus spat. "You and your stupid principles, your refusal to be practical, your obsession with legacy over family." "I chose family," Jack said. "I chose what was best for all of you, what was right. You're the one who chose money over everything else." "Because money matters," Marcus's voice cracked. "In the real world, Dad, money is what keeps you safe. It's what gives you power, options, security, and I needed it. I needed it so badly, and you threw away millions because of some fantasy about wolves and covenants." "The wolves are real, Marcus. You know they are. Emily told us what Hester said. They defended me. They protected me. Because I accepted something you can't even understand." "Magic?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "You think the universe cares about ancient pacts? You think there's some cosmic force protecting you? It's delusion, Dad. Beautiful, comforting delusion. But it's still delusion." Jack moved closer. The wolves were nearby. He could feel them in the trees, watching, waiting for his command. But he held them back. This needed to be resolved between father and son, not through force. "Tell me about the debts," Jack said gently. "Tell me what's really driving this." Marcus's face crumpled. "Gambling," he admitted. "I made bets I couldn't cover, borrowed from people I shouldn't have borrowed from. They're threatening me, Dad. They're threatening my family. I needed that land sale to make it right, to save myself. And you thought stealing from me was the answer?" "I thought," Marcus's voice broke. "I thought you'd understand eventually. That you'd see I was trying to survive. That family should help family." "Family does help family," Jack said. "But not through theft. Not through betrayal. Not through trying to have me committed or hiring men to kidnap me." He took another step closer. "Marcus, if you'd come to me honestly, if you'd told me about your problems without trying to take what wasn't yours, I would have helped you. I would have found a way." "Would you?" Marcus's eyes were wet now. "Would you really have given up your precious land for me?" "I would have mortgaged it, worked with you, found solutions that didn't require selling our family's legacy. But you never gave me that chance. You assumed I'd say no, so you tried to force it." Marcus picked up a lighter from his pocket, flicked it. The flame danced in the darkness. "It's too late now. I've destroyed everything. My marriage, my relationship with my siblings, my freedom. The police are after me. I've got nothing left." "You have a choice," Jack said urgently. "You can burn that tree and go to prison for arson, attempted murder, all of it. Or you can put down the lighter and let me help you face this properly. Take responsibility, make amends, rebuild." "Why would you help me after everything I've done?" "Because you're my son," Jack said simply. "Because I remember the boy you were before the world hardened you. Because Sarah would want me to try. Because it's what family does, real family, not the transactional relationship you've been treating it as, but real connection, real love." Marcus stood frozen, the lighter trembling in his hand. Jack could see the war raging inside him, pride versus desperation, anger versus grief, the need to lash out versus the deep, childlike need to be saved. "Dad," Marcus whispered, "I'm so scared." I know you are. But you don't have to face it alone." Behind Jack, Daniels and his deputies were positioned at the tree line, ready to intervene. But Jack raised a hand slightly, a signal to wait. Let this play out. Let his son make the choice. Marcus looked at the tree, at the gasoline, at the lighter. Then he looked at his father. Jack saw the moment it shifted, saw the exact instant when something in Marcus broke and reformed into something different. The lighter clicked shut. Marcus dropped it in the snow, and then he collapsed, knees hitting the frozen ground, sobs tearing from his chest. Jack moved forward and wrapped his arms around his son, held him as he cried, held him as deputies moved in, held him as the weight of consequence began to settle. "I've got you," Jack said softly. "I've got you." 6 months passed like water over stone, slowly reshaping everything it touched. Jack stood at the oak tree on a warm June morning, watching his grandchildren play in the meadow. Tom had moved back to the property permanently with his wife, Anna, and their 2 children. They'd renovated the cabin's 2nd floor, created space for their family while preserving the history that permeated every beam and board. Marcus was serving his sentence in the state prison, 10 years for conspiracy, forgery, and attempted arson. But Jack visited him monthly. They talked carefully at first, then with increasing honesty. Marcus was in therapy, working through the gambling addiction and the deeper issues that had driven his desperation. It would be a long road, but Jack saw glimpses of the son he remembered, the boy who'd caught his first fish in the creek and cried when they had to throw it back because it was too small. Emily had entered a plea deal, receiving probation and community service. She'd moved to town, gotten a job at the library, and came to the property every Sunday for dinner. The relationship was tentative, bruised, but healing. Last week she had brought flowers to place at the base of the oak tree, a silent apology to Sarah's memory. The wolves were a constant presence now, not always visible, but always felt. Jack had learned to use the telepathic bond the Covenant provided. He could sense their movements through the forest, could call them when needed, could understand their wordless communications. They'd become more than protectors. They'd become companions in his guardianship of the land. Dr. Morrison had documented everything, creating a medical and anthropological record of the Wolf's Keeper phenomenon. She'd connected Jack with historians and indigenous elders who held similar knowledge of old covenants, old ways of being that modern society had forgotten. Jack wasn't alone in this. There were others, scattered across the country, maintaining their own bonds with the wild. Tom was learning the responsibilities of a keeper. Not because he'd been chosen, the wolves hadn't selected him, but because Jack wanted to ensure the knowledge didn't die with him. Tom studied the historical documents, learned the rituals, understood the philosophy behind the covenant. When Jack's time came, whenever that might be, Tom would be able to guide the next chosen keeper. Maybe one of his children, maybe a future generation. The covenant would continue. Jack walked to the cabin as the morning sun climbed higher. Inside, he found the small wooden box containing Sarah's ring. He'd moved it from the mantel to the bedside table, where he could see it each morning and evening, a reminder of what mattered, of why he fought to protect this place. In the box, beneath the ring, was the letter Sarah had written. He read it again, as he did most mornings. "Jack, if you're reading this, it means the wolves have called you. Don't be afraid. This is who you were always meant to be. Our land isn't just dirt and trees, it's sacred trust. Honor it, honor your ancestors, and know that I'm with you, always, in every tree, every stone, every howl in the night. I loved you for your integrity, your stubbornness, your refusal to compromise on things that mattered. Don't change now. Don't let anyone, not even our children, make you into something less than you are. You are a keeper of more than land. You're a keeper of principles, of legacy, of the wild connection that makes us human. I'm proud to have shared my life with you. Make me proud now by living yours fully. All my love, always. Sarah. Jack folded the letter carefully, placed it back with the ring. Through the window he could see Tom teaching his 6-year-old daughter, Emma, how to identify wolf tracks. The girl was fascinated, unafraid, asking questions faster than her father could answer them. Jack smiled. Maybe she would be the next one chosen. Maybe the calling would skip Tom's generation and go straight to Emma. The covenant worked in mysterious ways. Kodi nudged Jack's hand, wanting attention. Jack knelt down, scratched behind the dog's ears. "You're getting old, boy," he said affectionately. Kodi was 8 now, showing grey around his muzzle, moving a little slower. But he was still loyal, still protective, still the companion Sarah had known Jack would need. That evening, the family gathered for dinner. Tom, Anna, and the kids. Emily arrived with a pie she'd baked. Even Dr. Morrison stopped by, as she often did, bringing medical supplies and good conversation. They ate on the porch as the sun set, talking and laughing, the sound of family filling the spaces that had been empty for so long. As darkness fell, the wolves appeared at the tree line. 7 of them, as always, with the alpha at the center. Emma saw them first and gasped with delight rather than fear. "Grandpa, look, the wolves came for dinner." Everyone turned to look. Anna tensed initially, a mother's protective instinct, but Tom put a hand on her arm. "They're friends," he said quietly. "Family, in a way." Jack walked to the edge of the porch. The alpha approached slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. Their eyes met, and Jack felt the familiar surge of connection. Gratitude flowing both ways, understanding, partnership in protecting something precious. "Thank you for coming," Jack said aloud, not caring if anyone thought him strange for talking to a wolf. "You're always welcome here." The alpha dipped its head in acknowledgement, then led the pack back into the forest. But Jack knew they wouldn't go far. They never did. This was their land as much as it was his. Shared stewardship, shared destiny. Tom joined Jack at the porch rail. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Accepting the calling, everything it cost you?" Jack thought about Marcus in prison, about the family fracture that might never fully heal, about the burden of responsibility that would follow him until death. Then he thought about the night in the blizzard, about being saved, about finding purpose in grief, about understanding that some things were worth fighting for even when the cost was high. "No," he said finally. "I don't regret it. This land, this covenant, this life, it's who I was always meant to be. I just didn't know it until the wolves showed me." He looked at his son, put a hand on Tom's shoulder. "Your mother knew. She saw it in me long before I saw it in myself. She married me knowing I might be chosen someday, and she accepted it willingly. That's love, Tom. Real love. Accepting someone completely, including the parts they haven't discovered yet." Tom nodded slowly. "I understand." "You'll need to remember that," Jack said, "when your time comes to guide the next keeper. When Emma or your son faces this choice, you'll need to help them understand that it's not a burden. It's a gift, a chance to be part of something greater than yourself." They stood together in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead. Inside, Jack could hear Emily playing a game with the kids, their laughter bright and pure. Kodi dozed at his feet. Anna was cleaning up dinner, humming softly. The sounds of home, the sounds of family. Jack looked toward the oak tree, barely visible now in the darkness. The tree where he'd carved his vows, where he'd nearly died, where he'd been reborn, where he'd faced his son and chosen mercy over vengeance. "They say you can't go home again," Jack said quietly, more to himself than to Tom. "But I learned something different. Home isn't a place you go, it's a promise you keep. To the land, to your family, to yourself. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, to the wolves who choose to trust you with their wilderness. He paused, thinking about everything that had happened, everything he'd lost and everything he'd gained, the price of integrity, the reward of purpose. "This land will be here long after I'm gone," Jack continued. "Protected by you, then your children, then theirs. The pact will hold. Because some promises are worth keeping, even when the cost is everything you thought you knew about family." From the forest came a howl, long and low and beautiful. The alpha, singing to the night. One by one the other wolves joined in, their voices braiding together in ancient harmony. Jack added his voice to theirs, a human sound among the wild, and felt his grandson join in, then Tom, then even Emily laughing as she tried to howl. The family, complete in this moment, connected to something older and deeper than blood. The howling continued, gradually softening into the sound of wind through pines. Jack closed his eyes and felt Sarah beside him in spirit, felt the weight of 7 generations of keepers supporting him, felt the land itself embracing him as its guardian. He had survived the blizzard, survived the betrayal, survived the breaking and remaking of family, and he had emerged not diminished, but transformed. This was legacy, this was covenant, this was home. And as the last light faded from the sky, Jack Rayner stood on his porch, surrounded by family and protected by wolves, knowing with absolute certainty that he had finally found his place in the world. Exactly where he'd always been meant to be.